Listen carefully, because these words may bring the peace your heart has been searching for. Soothing. If someone walked away from your love, not because you failed them, but because closeness frightened them, then this message is meant for you. Right now, silence may feel like surrender. It may seem as though doing nothing means losing everything. Reassuring, but what feels empty today is often where real strength begins to grow. Time is not working against you. In fact, time is preparing to accomplish what no amount of chasing, explaining, or convincing ever could. If someone avoids emotional intimacy, it does not mean they are fearless. It usually means they have become skilled at protecting themselves. They protect themselves with distance. They protect themselves with control. They protect themselves by leaving before vulnerability has the chance to reach them. As long as you remain available, waiting for them to change, they never have to face the true impact of walking away. They can continue believing that nothing important was lost. Everything changes the moment you step back. Love that has been avoided does not simply disappear. It settles deep beneath the surface. It waits quietly. And over time, the distractions that once kept uncomfortable feelings buried begin to lose their power. The constant noise fades. The temporary relief wears off. Eventually, silence becomes impossible to escape, and that is often when the emotions they postponed finally begin to surface. This is not about revenge. It is about reality. No one can outrun truth forever. You were never meant to spend your life convincing someone to value you. Your purpose was never to prove your worth. Your responsibility is to honor your own value and allow your absence to teach lessons your words never could. The moment you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, and stop exhausting yourself trying to be understood by someone determined not to understand, the emotional balance begins to shift. At first, they may experience relief. They may feel free, independent, even convinced they made the right decision. But time has remarkable patience. Little by little, relief gives way to restlessness. Familiar memories begin returning without invitation. They remember your consistency. They notice the calm you brought into their life. The kindness they once overlooked becomes impossible to ignore because it is no longer there. Ironically, the distance they insisted they wanted slowly becomes the very place where they feel the most emotionally exposed. Never mistake your silence for abandonment. Your silence is an act of self-respect. Choosing peace instead of constant pursuit is not giving up on someone else. It is finally choosing yourself. That decision is where genuine healing begins. Avoidance survives by escaping uncomfortable feelings in the moment. Healing, however, unfolds through patience. The longer someone remains separated from authentic connection, the harder it becomes to avoid what has been left unresolved. Emotional debts eventually demand attention, not because you are impossible to replace, but because sincere connection leaves lasting impressions. Real love changes people, and the heart remembers experiences the mind tries to dismiss. Do not rush the process by returning to what repeatedly wounded you. Allow life to unfold naturally. What is meant to awaken will awaken in its proper season. Whether they eventually return with greater emotional maturity or continue walking their own path becomes far less important, because by then you will no longer measure your worth by someone else's ability to recognize it. Allow time to accomplish what pressure never can. Let silence carry the message words failed to deliver. Let absence reveal what presence could not. The beautiful truth is this: the moment you stop trying to become enough for someone else is the moment you begin becoming whole within yourself. Distance often reveals reality more clearly than confrontation ever will. Truth rarely needs to argue. It simply reveals itself over time. When emotions are intense and attachment is still active, confrontation feels productive. Long conversations happen. Questions are asked, explanations are exchanged, feelings overflow. Yet despite all that effort, very little actually changes. That is because confrontation usually speaks only to conscious thoughts, while distance reaches much deeper into the subconscious. Distance removes distractions. It dissolves rehearsed explanations and defensive reactions. It takes away the environment where emotional avoidance feels safest. As long as you remain emotionally available, an avoidant person can continue relying on your emotional energy without fully confronting their own feelings. Your presence unintentionally softens the consequences of their choices. Once that comfort disappears, there is nothing left to shield them from themselves. Truth does not appear overnight. It rises gradually, honestly, and without permission. Distance reveals who someone truly is once they are no longer reacting to you, but sitting alone with their own thoughts. During confrontation, people defend the identities they have built. During distance, those identities begin to crack. There is no one left to blame, no conflict to distract them, no reassurance to temporarily quiet what lives inside. The human brain naturally seeks closure. Unfinished emotional experiences continue resurfacing because the mind is designed to revisit what has never been resolved. The memories repeat, the emotions return. The unfinished chapters refuse to remain closed. This is why confrontation often strengthens avoidance instead of healing it. It provides emotional intensity without requiring genuine vulnerability. It allows someone to feel justified, overwhelmed, defensive, or powerful, anything except deeply accountable for what they truly feel. Distance offers none of those escapes. It does not accuse. It does not beg. It simply creates space. And in that space, comparison becomes unavoidable. Life without your presence begins to reveal what your presence quietly contributed all along. Most importantly, distance does not only reveal their truth, it reveals yours. While confrontation keeps you emotionally entangled, distance restores perspective. You stop believing promises and begin recognizing patterns. You stop chasing potential and start accepting reality. That clarity becomes the foundation for a future built not on longing, but on genuine peace. With enough distance, you begin to recognize things that were impossible to see while you were emotionally invested. You notice how often you explained your intentions, minimized your own needs, or accepted less than you deserved just to preserve the relationship. Separation creates room for discernment. Instead of constantly asking why they behaved the way they did, you begin asking a far more important question. How did their behavior make you feel? That change in perspective is not insignificant. It marks the beginning of genuine healing. Truth is rarely comfortable when there is nothing left to distract you from it. In silence, the avoidant eventually encounters the emotions they spent so much energy postponing. It does not happen overnight. The first response is usually relief. Without emotional expectations or difficult conversations, life seems lighter. But relief built on avoidance is temporary. Once the excitement of new distractions fades and the mind grows quiet again, absence begins to take its place. That absence becomes a mirror, and mirrors have no interest in protecting illusions. Distance reveals whether love was rooted in something genuine or whether it survived only because it was convenient. If the connection carried real emotional depth, it eventually returns through grief, reflection, and longing. If it was sustained only by comfort or habit, it fades without much resistance. Either outcome provides clarity. Distance never manipulates the answer. It simply uncovers what has always been true. You were never meant to battle endlessly for certainty. Clarity arrives the moment you stop fighting for it. Distance is not an act of punishment. It is an act of alignment. It creates the conditions for balance to return naturally. Illusions struggle to survive in prolonged silence, while what is authentic eventually seeks resolution. By stepping away from emotional chaos, you make room for wisdom. Instead of forcing conclusions, you allow reality to reveal itself in its own time. When truth finally arrives without pressure or persuasion, it carries a certainty that requires no defense. It simply exists. That is why distance often accomplishes what confrontation cannot. Truth does not need louder voices. It needs enough space to breathe. Time has a remarkable ability to dissolve emotional numbness and expose attachment wounds that have remained buried for years. Someone who avoids intimacy is not lacking emotions. More often, they have learned to disconnect from them because feeling became associated with pain. Emotional numbing becomes a survival mechanism. They stay busy, distracted, detached, convincing themselves that distance equals emotional freedom. But time patiently dismantles that illusion. At first, life feels easier. Without emotional responsibility, they experience temporary calm. There are no expectations, no vulnerability, no pressure to fully engage. That temporary relief is often mistaken for healing, but it is merely emotional suspension. Feelings never disappear simply because they are ignored. They wait quietly beneath the surface until the mind finally becomes still enough to notice them. As distractions lose their grip and the nervous system settles, the protective numbness begins to weaken. Memories return unexpectedly. Moments once pushed aside replay with surprising clarity. Emotional experiences that seemed finished suddenly feel unfinished again because unresolved attachment always seeks completion. Time eventually exposes the difference between true freedom and avoidance. Real freedom creates lasting peace. Avoidance eventually creates restlessness, and silence makes that restlessness impossible to ignore. The body remembers experiences the mind tries to bury. Attachment wounds are stored deep within the nervous system, not inside logical explanations. That is why reasoning alone cannot erase them. Only time, paired with stillness, allows those hidden emotions to rise into awareness. As emotional numbness fades, discomfort naturally increases. They begin feeling the weight of everything they postponed: intimacy, loss, regret, missed opportunities, and genuine connection. This is not punishment. It is the natural consequence of avoiding unresolved emotions. Emotional debts never disappear. They simply wait until they can no longer be ignored. Time never rushes this awakening because authentic healing cannot be forced. It arrives only when running is no longer possible. Often the first emotion is not longing but confusion. They may feel emotionally unsettled, unusually irritable, or burdened by sadness without understanding its source. This is the nervous system attempting to recalibrate. The protective distance that once felt secure now begins to feel empty. Within that emptiness, old attachment wounds quietly emerge: fear of dependence, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, and fear of allowing someone to truly know them. Those fears never disappeared. They were simply hidden beneath avoidance. Time also slowly removes the illusion of control. Avoidance often depends on controlling emotional distance, deciding when to move closer and when to withdraw. Eventually, that strategy loses its effectiveness. There is no one left to regulate against, no one left to push away or pull back. In that silence, the neglected inner child finally finds a voice, expressing itself through grief, longing, sadness, and unmet needs. This is the deeper purpose of time. It gently softens resistance, weakens denial, and allows truth to emerge without force. Confrontation often activates defensiveness. Time quietly dissolves it. Once those defenses begin to fall, the wound is no longer hidden beneath coping mechanisms. It is finally experienced honestly. And when those attachment wounds become fully visible, something extraordinary happens. Choice becomes possible, not reactive choices driven by fear, but conscious decisions guided by awareness. Time never promises reconciliation. What it always offers is revelation. That revelation becomes the beginning of authentic healing, whether two people eventually reunite or continue separate paths. That is why time holds so much power. It never demands transformation. It creates the conditions where transformation becomes possible. Silence plays an equally important role. It forces avoidance to face what constant distraction once protected them from. Avoidance survives through activity, endless stimulation, emotional detours, and anything that keeps deeper feelings out of awareness. As long as there is another distraction, another task, another person, or another escape, the inner world remains untouched. Silence removes every exit. There is no one left to manage, no emotions to deflect, no outside focus capable of drowning out what lives within. What remains is the self in its most honest form. Initially, silence can feel empowering. It appears to confirm independence and emotional control. Productivity increases. Entertainment fills the hours. New experiences provide temporary excitement. It seems like life has moved forward, but silence is never simply the absence of noise. It is the absence of escape. Eventually, every distraction loses its ability to protect. The internal world begins growing louder. Thoughts become impossible to ignore. Feelings that were once buried demand attention. Conversations replay in vivid detail. Small emotional moments suddenly carry enormous meaning. Silence never attacks. It simply remembers. This is where the deeper discomfort begins. Not overwhelming pain, but a quiet ache that refuses to disappear. A lingering awareness that something meaningful was never fully resolved. Many avoidant individuals mistake this feeling for boredom or simple restlessness. In reality, it is emotional truth finally reaching conscious awareness. Silence removes external pressure. but in doing so, it dramatically increases inner awareness. And once that awareness begins, it becomes far more difficult to hide from what has always been waiting beneath the surface. Awareness is the one thing avoidance tries hardest to escape. Distraction has always functioned as emotional armor. It creates the illusion of control while protecting someone from facing what truly lives beneath the surface. But silence slowly removes that protection. There is no one left to blame, no conflict left to manage, and no story left to defend. In that quiet space, the real self becomes impossible to ignore, and with that visibility comes vulnerability. What appears first is not always longing. More often, the initial response is resistance. There may be frustration, irritation, or an urgent desire to fill the silence with something, anything, that prevents deeper reflection. This is simply the mind's final attempt to preserve old coping mechanisms. Yet silence is patient. It remains long after distractions lose their power. As the quiet continues, emotions that have been buried for years gradually begin to surface. Grief over what was lost, fear of genuine closeness, regret for creating emotional distance. These feelings were never absent. They were merely postponed until there was nowhere left to hide from them. Silence also reveals the true cost of avoidance. Without constant stimulation, emotional emptiness becomes impossible to ignore. The connection that once brought warmth and stability is no longer present, and its absence becomes deeply tangible. What was once taken for granted can now only be experienced through its loss. That experience cannot be explained away with logic because it is felt rather than analyzed. This process is uncomfortable because it dismantles the illusion of complete self-sufficiency. Many avoidant individuals build part of their identity around believing they do not need anyone. Silence gently challenges that belief. It asks a difficult question that cannot be avoided forever. What were you truly running from? The answer is rarely another person. More often, it is the vulnerability that genuine love required. Within that silence, the inner child frequently begins to speak. Old fears rise into awareness: fear of being consumed by another person, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. Distance once kept these fears hidden. Now that same distance exposes them. Silence does not create emotional wounds. It simply uncovers what has always been there. That is why silence possesses such transformative power. It accomplishes what endless conversations often cannot. Rather than arguing with defenses, it quietly reaches the nervous system itself. Reflection happens naturally instead of being forced. Whether someone responds by growing or by creating even more distance is ultimately beyond your control. One truth remains unchanged. Once emotional truth is genuinely felt, it cannot be erased. Your absence eventually becomes a mirror they can no longer avoid. While you were present, your energy shaped the emotional environment. Your consistency created stability. Your understanding softened difficult moments. Your willingness to keep trying often balanced a relationship that was not equally supported. Because of that, they rarely had to confront themselves. Your presence unintentionally absorbed much of the imbalance. When you step away, that protection disappears. Absence creates contrast. It illuminates everything that once blended into everyday life. Your kindness, your patience, your reliability, your emotional safety. These qualities often become fully visible only after they are no longer available. Not immediately, but almost always with time. Initially, they may experience relief. Life feels lighter without emotional responsibility, but that feeling slowly fades as the reflection grows clearer. Without you present, they are left alone with their own behavioral patterns. There is no one left to pursue, withdraw from, or emotionally regulate against. The familiar cycle of pushing and pulling loses its purpose. When that cycle collapses, self-awareness has room to emerge. Absence reflects habits that once remained hidden. It exposes every conversation they avoided, every repair they postponed, every moment they retreated instead of remaining emotionally available. It reflects how often they relied upon your patience while offering inconsistency in return. Those patterns begin echoing back through memories, quiet moments, and the emotional emptiness left behind. The mirror does not primarily reveal who you were. It reveals who they became while they were with you. That realization is difficult because it introduces responsibility rather than blame. Slowly, The story that the relationship failed because it was too demanding begins to lose credibility. In the quiet reflection created by your absence, they may recognize that what truly overwhelmed them was not love itself, but the vulnerability that love required. Your absence also reveals the depth of intimacy they struggled to receive. They begin recognizing the care that was freely offered, not because it was unavailable, but because they were emotionally closed to accepting it. That realization often arrives gently. It is less like dramatic regret and more like a quiet ache, a lingering awareness that something meaningful slipped through their hands unfinished. Memory sharpens that reflection even further. Conversations replay with completely different meaning. Words you once spoke are heard differently. Feelings you expressed but that were dismissed suddenly carry weight. Acts of care that once seemed ordinary become deeply significant. Without defensive thinking filtering those memories, they can finally be observed without excuses or justification. This is the moment where two different paths become possible. Some people immediately search for fresh distractions, hoping to avoid the reflection once again. Others choose to remain with the discomfort long enough for it to teach them something honest about themselves. The mirror never determines which direction they take. Its only purpose is to reveal reality. Your responsibility is not to influence what they see. Your responsibility is simply to trust the reflection. Absence is not cruelty, it is clarity. It returns emotional responsibility to the person who has always needed to carry it. You are no longer responsible for awakening someone else's self-awareness. Perhaps the most freeing truth of all is that the mirror serves you just as much as it serves them. Whether they change or remain exactly as they are, you receive something equally valuable: clarity. Your absence reveals who genuinely appreciated your presence, who respected your energy, and who noticed the difference once you stopped carrying the emotional weight of the relationship. Stepping away does not erase your significance. It often makes your value impossible to ignore. Anything that truly mattered leaves a lasting imprint. When that presence is no longer there, its absence speaks louder than words ever could. This is why detachment should never be confused with punishment. Healthy detachment is an act of alignment with your own self-respect. Many people worry that creating distance makes them cold or uncaring. In reality, healthy detachment has nothing to do with making another person suffer. It is about ending the habit of abandoning yourself. Punishment attempts to control someone else's choices. Detachment simply chooses to stop sacrificing your own well-being in hopes that someone else will finally change. Detachment is not punishment, it is an act of self-respect. When you step away from someone who avoids intimacy, you are not withdrawing love to make them suffer. You are protecting your own peace. Punishment tries to control another person's behavior. Detachment releases that need. It shifts your focus from, "I hope they realize what they lost," to, "I will no longer abandon myself just to be chosen." Self-respect grows when your actions reflect your worth. If someone repeatedly avoids emotional presence, communication, or accountability, remaining in that cycle slowly erodes your trust in yourself. Detachment restores it. It reminds your nervous system that you deserve to be seen, heard, and valued. Detachment is not indifference. You can still care deeply while refusing to chase. Love does not require self-sacrifice. Real maturity means accepting people as they are, instead of trying to rescue or change them. You stop rewarding distance with pursuit and stop proving your value through endless patience. Healing begins when you stop chasing and start trusting divine timing. Chasing is driven by fear and urgency. It convinces you that if you do not act immediately, you will lose something essential. Trust is different. It allows you to be honest without forcing outcomes. It lets silence reveal what words never could. Divine timing is not passive, it is wise. It teaches you to stop interrupting lessons that another person must learn on their own. By stepping back, you create space for truth to reach them, while giving yourself the freedom to heal. Whether they change or not is no longer the measure of your peace. As you trust the process, your nervous system settles. You stop searching for signs, waiting for messages, or measuring your worth through someone else's actions. Instead, you reconnect with yourself. You realize you cannot love someone into emotional readiness. That choice belongs to them. Remember this: you were never meant to chase what is truly meant for you. What left your life did not diminish your value. It created the space for you to return to yourself. Walk forward with peace, self-respect, and confidence, trusting that what genuinely aligns with you will never require you to lose yourself in order to keep it.